So yeah, as Daniel said, this is the final talk in our series. We've been looking at a really important text, the Bodhicharyavatara, the guide to the Bodhisattva path, the Bodhisattva way of living. And we've been evoking over the previous weeks how a Bodhisattva lives, how a Bodhisattva sees the world, how a Bodhisattva practices. And for me, there's so many amazing verses in this text, and we hopefully been lucky enough to get a copy of the edited text from Vedanya. And maybe 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we had a talk on meditation, the meditation chapter of the Bodhicharyavatara. And we heard from Mokshitara and Maitrivasin about what Shantideva, the author of this text, has to say about the way a Bodhisattva meditates, the approach to meditation. And I want to just capture that with there's so many beautiful verses, but a couple of verses which really capture this approach to meditation of a Bodhisattva. Whoever longs to quickly save themselves and others should practice this supreme mystery, exchanging self and other. All the suffering in the world comes from obsession with ourselves. All the joy in the world comes from wanting others to be happy. Why say more? And then he goes on to say, having devoted ourselves to others in this way, we should meditate on putting ourselves in others' shoes. So, it was evoked beautifully by both Mokshitara and Maitrivasin in that talk, which I really recommend. And we thought it'd be a good way to end this series by looking at the meditation of a Bodhisattva and the meditation practice that we have, which helps us to practice in this way, loving others and exchanging self and others, the metta bhavana meditation. So we wanted to spend an evening, Satyajoti and I, just to explore this practice of the metta bhavana, because some people love the metta bhavana, some people dislike the metta bhavana, some people find it easy, some people find it difficult. So we wanted to explore what the practice is about, how to work with the practice, and maybe unlock some of the secrets of the practice as well, and to share with you some approaches, some of our own approaches to some of the stages of the metta bhavana. And you'll notice there's a chair and a bell, which is unusual for Sangha night. So we'll be largely talking about the practice, but periodically we're just going to lead through short reflections to give you approaches that you can use in the metta bhavana. Yeah, and after the break, obviously, we'll be talking in the discussion groups about our practice of metta bhavana and these approaches that we're going to share with you. And then after the break, we'll get a chance to put those into practice and play with the metta bhavana. So I think a lot of people go wrong with the metta bhavana or get stuck with the metta bhavana, maybe from not understanding the context of it. And the metta bhavana practice is a karmic practice. What we're doing in the metta bhavana, we're working with our hearts and our minds karmically and transforming, moulding, sculpting our heart and minds into the minds of a bodhisattva. And we are, it's a very powerful, it's a very potent practice. I just wanted to share an anecdote from last night, actually yesterday evening. Yesterday evening at Men's Mitra night, there was what I suspect was a thief, a kind of robber, who was kind of lurking around the toilet area and where the people's possessions were hanging up. And I had a very interesting response because I felt quite friendly towards him. And I spent quite a lot of time just talking to him and kind of following him around the room, talking to him around the building in different rooms. And it's just really interesting that I didn't, just to reflect on this today, I didn't feel kind of angry or kind of threatened or ill will. I just felt quite a lot of metta and kind of sympathy towards him as well, but also a lot of metta to the people whose possessions were there, making sure that I locked the doors, and when he came back in, locked the other doors. But just very struck by the power of metta bhavana practice in a way that even someone who's trying to steal from you, you can be friendly towards, and that can come quite naturally. It's not straight. It's just a very powerful practice that will transform you. And I could tell lots of stories about how the metta bhavana has transformed my relationships and my emotions and my responses to people. But hopefully what we can evoke this evening is the power and potency of the practice. And hopefully give you some confidence and trust in the practice and how you can work within the practice as well. So what I want to do is explore, to begin with, what I'm saying about it being a karmic practice. And I want to just revisit a teaching from the intro course, but it's a fundamental, it's a core Buddhist teaching. And this is our version, our kind of simplified version of the Wheel of Life that we present on the introductory course. And it simplifies a stage in the Wheel of Life where we have the 12 nidanas, which is how it explains actions and consequences. But you probably remember we talk about stimulus, but in traditional Buddhism we have contact with our senses, contact the world. We have what we call contact, an experience, a situation, a stimulus. And then there's a flavour, there's a kind of feeling tone to that experience, that contact. It's either pleasant, or it's dull, or it's unpleasant. And then we have a habitual response to that feeling, that experience. It's almost like an instinctive response, just to want to grab and hoard the pleasant sensations, push away, avoid the unpleasant, and just, we get bored in response to the dull sensations. We're not really that interested. And we can see how karmically we can either deepen those habits, or we can, with awareness, act creatively. And we can come up with create new habits, new responses in relation to our experience and these feelings. And this is exactly the same with people and with relationships. People come in different flavors. There are people that we find pleasant, people that we find dull, and people that we find deeply unpleasant as well. And we have our habitual response to those people. And that's how our relationships are built. It's just this very, very habitual way that we operate. And with the metta bhavana, what we're doing is we're transforming that habitual response, and the creative response to every human being that we meet is friendliness and kindness and metta and love. And that's what we're doing in the metta bhavana over and over again, over a period of weeks and months and years and decades. We're transforming our responses to all the different people, all the different human beings that we meet, to a response of love. That becomes our natural, spontaneous response, as a response of love and of kindness. So in those individual practices, it's not really so important what you experience, whether you experience really warm, fuzzy emotions. You might do sometimes in the metta bhavana, but a lot of what you might be doing is just working on that habitual response and transforming it time and time again, so that over a long period of time, your heart and your mind becomes very, very different, and your response to human beings becomes very, very different. So I wanted to just set that context of the metta bhavana, so to avoid any misunderstanding about what's going on in the practice and what, because sometimes people think the metta bhavana is difficult and they're doing it wrong. Well, it is difficult, and you're not doing it wrong. It's, but it just takes patience and perseverance, and it will be really transformative. Okay, so the next thing I want to say before I hand over to Satyajyoti is that, when we meet people, often what we're not meeting the person. What we're meeting or what we're encountering is our idea of that person, our stories about the person. So very often we're not actually in contact with the person. So the kind of responses, the flavour of the person and our habitual response is all in relationship to our story about them, our idea about this person. And this is really obvious when you close your eyes and do the metta bhavana. The person isn't there. All you've got is you're left with your idea of that person and your stories of that person. And what we're going to experiment and look at this evening is how in the metta bhavana you can play with that. We can use our imagination to both to bring the person to mind more vividly and more intensely, so there's going to be more of a stronger emotional response. But also we can play with our stories and our idea, our perception of the person by different ways that we can imaginatively bring the people to mind in each stage. So we're going to explore how we use our imagination in the metta bhavana. And I just wanted to illustrate this by saying, well, there may be some people who struggle with anxiety, and I used to struggle a lot with anxiety. Occasionally I still do. But we can know if you've had that situation of being, having anxiety, that hindrance of anxiety, the power of the imagination, because we can very vividly imagine scenarios and stories, and they have a very powerful effect on us emotionally. We have a very vivid emotional response to that. So our mind is very powerful, our imagination is very powerful. We can do an anxiety bhavana, or we could do an anger bhavana. We can very vividly bring to mind particular scenarios, and they produce a response of anger. So in a way, what we've got a choice with is what we bring to mind, and then our emotions will follow as a result of that. So that's what we're going to explore largely this evening. So I'll hand over to Satyajyoti.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at 3 of the 5 stages of the metta bhavana. So I'm going to start by looking at the good friend stage. So I'm just going to talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll just do a little reflection on it as well. So as Bodhinaga said, it's really important when we're doing the metta bhavana to be clear why we're doing it and what the point of every stage is. And for me, the friend stage has got at least 2 reasons why we do it. One is because we're bringing to mind, hopefully, somebody who we've got just quite a simple response to, that they, we have a response of warmth to them. We wish them well. And the second is that hopefully with a friend, with most friends, with some friends, it's not so complicated as it might be with other relationships with people. I find it with my friends, it's easier just to wish them well, what's best for them, and have less of me involved, less of me wanting, often with a partner, with a parent, with children, with family. There's quite a lot of what we want out of that relationship when we think about them, when we think of them with love. But hopefully with a friend, usually, sometimes, it's much simpler. And of course, what we're trying to do in the metta bhavana is develop this just sense of well-wishing, this sense of friendliness, this sense of wanting what's best for the person. Okay, so how do we go about that? Well, I think the first thing to do is to try and choose somebody who does simply bring that. I think if that, I try and choose somebody who, if they walked in through the door now, I'd think, oh, how lovely to see that person, whoever it is. There have been times in my life, though, when I get myself in a bit of a mess, and I don't find that I've got anybody like that. And then I've tried different ways to connect with a sense of warmth and friendliness. So I find it's much easier to feel warmth and friendliness towards babies, children, dogs and cats. So there's been times when my experience of the metta bhavana has been so dry on retreat that I realised if I brought to mind the image of a cat of mine walking up the path, when people who know cats know they put their tails up when they're pleased to see you, it would give me quite a warm response. And I could use that as the basis to develop this sense of friendliness. And then actually realised I did have some friends and I could actually wish them well. And some of the ways that, so I realized when I started to think about this, it's such a huge area. The great thing about the metta bhavana is it is very open in many ways. It is a very creative practice. And if that makes you think, oh God, I'm not creative, well, we all are creative. We can bring our imagination to this practice. So I'm just going to say a few things that we might try out. So, the first is that I think it's really important that we bring our friend to mind as strongly as we can. That's half the work, if we can really have a sense of them. So for some of us, we've got a good visual imagination, and that might mean we can see our friend. For some of us, we're more kinesthetic, like I am. I often imagine my friend sitting next to me. I have a sense of my friend. Some people maybe have a better sort of auditory sense, and they might imagine their friend's voice or their friend's laugh. So it's about finding a way that you can really get a vivid sense of your friend. You might use a memory of the last time you saw your friend. You might imagine your friend being happy somewhere. So using your imagination to get a really good sense of them. And then I think there's something about waiting. So the metta bhavana is something that's quite subtle, sometimes quite subtle. And there's something about just waiting and being with that image of your friend and seeing what happens. So there's a little story that I like, which is that if you were to go into the forest and what you really wanted to do was see the little animals that live in the forest, if you go blundering in expecting to see them, they're not going to be there, they're going to be hiding. But if you go in and you sit down and you wait patiently, after a while, the little mice and voles and birds will all start coming out if you're sitting quietly. And it's a bit like that with metta. If we can go into the forest, bring our friend to mind, and we wait, sometimes we will find a response that just arises naturally. Some of us will have had upbringings that mean we repress our positivity to people, our warmth to people. And there's something about just learning again how to have that very natural, very human response to a friend. Okay, then there's a couple of other ways that things we can do. I find it very interesting to think of giving my friend a present, a gift, because then I have to really get myself in their shoes, think what would they really like, and imagine that and imagine their response. Another thing I do quite a lot is I think of myself in a favourite place, up high on a hill, looking down, and I imagine a friend sitting next to me, that I've invited them into my space. So that's something to try. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a little go at, I'm going to lead you through a little reflection. In a way, the most important part of tonight is when we're going to talk about the metta bhavana later and do the metta bhavana after the tea break. So as you're doing this, you might think there are things that come up that you'd like to talk about in the group afterwards or try later on when you do the metta bhavana. So if you want to get comfortable, and then when you're ready, if you're happy to shut your eyes or look down at the floor in front of you, maybe just have a little wriggle, check you're sitting on your sitting bones. Have a sense of your body supported by the chair or by the cushions and the floor. Bringing your awareness into your experiences in your body. And then bringing to mind a good friend, as vividly as you can. Maybe remembering the last time you saw them, maybe imagining that they're sitting next to you, maybe you get a strong visual image of their face. So just really bringing your friend to mind. If your mind wanders off, just coming back to your friend. And then wishing your friend well. May my friend be happy. May they be free of suffering. May they be well. May they progress. And just noticing any response you have of wishing them well. It might be physical, it might be a warmth feeling around your heart, in your belly. Or it might be more cognitive, it might be thinking thoughts, wishing them well. Whichever it is, just allowing yourself to rest your awareness on those thoughts, those feelings, so that they can grow and develop. And then imagine giving your friend a present. How do they respond? Imagine perhaps you're in a place that you love, and imagine your friend joining you there. And then perhaps just imagine breathing with your friend. Breathing in, and then on your out-breath, wishing them well. Just allowing your breath to come in and out, and on your out-breath, wishing your friend well. Okay, so I'm going to bring this little reflection to an end now. So just letting go of your friend, having a sense of how you're feeling right now.
Okay, so we're hopefully a bit warmed up now. The room's getting warmed up with some metta flowing. I want to talk about the neutral stage and how I work with the neutral stage in the metta bhavana. So I was talking about the wheel of life and those 3 different types of Vedana. There's pleasant, dull and unpleasant. And hopefully you get the sense there's the same with the people that we meet. So with our good friend, there's that pleasant response, that warm response. And with the neutral person, there's just a dull response. There's not really much response at all. It's somebody that we don't particularly like or dislike. We just don't know them that well. And so the response isn't that strong. So for me, this can be the most difficult stage in the metta bhavana. Actually, it's just that nothing much is happening. It doesn't seem like very much is happening. So I have to be quite creative and work in this stage to explore this person. And how I work in this stage is a lot of it I do off the cushion actually. So when I'm out and about, if I can remember to, I'll be trying to notice bits about more details about people and people that I see more often. So an example might be my hairdresser. I go to have my hair cut with a guy called Sam who's down the road, down the hill. And I brought him to mind. I was just trying to think how I work in the neutral stage. I was doing this yesterday. I brought him to mind and I could just see him in his shop, either cutting my hair, cutting somebody else's hair, and just getting a sense of his world and what was important to him, and just get a sense of flavour of him. So I think that if you're doing this, if you're actively looking for details about people, well, then you can bring that in when you bring them to mind on the cushion. You can bring some of those details. So anyway, you can't do that now because you need to have done that and then bring it with you. So start to do that. Take that instruction away. Go and start looking for details. Become more curious about people. Notice things about them, and then when you bring them to mind, there's something to work with. But I'll let you into a secret of how I work with this stage when I'm at Sangha night, and often other times as well. I'll pick somebody from Sangha night, somebody from the class. So these flavours of people of being kind of pleasant, unpleasant and dull, well, that's all relative really. There'll be some people in any particular class, there might be kind of 60 people here this evening. There'll be some people that you have a really warm response to that you know well. There might be some people that for whatever reason you have an unpleasant response to. And most of the people you just won't know that well, and the response will be a bit kind of dull actually. It won't be that strong. So what I would do in this stage when I'm doing, and what I'll do later in the metta bhavana, I'll just choose somebody. It might be somebody I've had a brief interaction with in the class, but I don't know them that well, and I don't have such a strong connection with them. So that's what I would encourage you to do. I'm going to lead you through a reflection, and I'd encourage you to pick somebody from the room, just somebody that you don't know, somebody that to you is a bit dull. And it's not that they are dull in themselves, because to other people who know them, they'll be really vivid, they'll be really good friends with them. So in a way, what this brings out for me is the arbitrariness of it. It's quite arbitrary which people you are close to and which people you aren't, which people are vivid and pleasant to you and which people are kind of dull and boring to you. It's a bit arbitrary. It might come down to a particular discussion group you've been in, or a tea break where you've had an interaction with somebody, or a retreat where you've been in the same group with them and you just got to know them. But that could have been anybody in the Sangha, it could have been anybody in the room where you could have that really deep connection with. And in a way it still could be that this person who's a stranger to you now could actually turn out to become a really deep friend, a really close friend. That's possible. So I think with the Sangha, I find this really, it gives me a lot more to work with in this stage. So that's what I will do on a Tuesday. And there's a lot we can work with because we already have a lot in common. What you're trying to do in this stage, I think with your imagination, whether it's someone from the Sangha or outside, is connect with what you have in common, with, the humanity with another human being. Then you can do the exchange of self and other. Your experience of life is very, very similar to their experience of life. They have the same emotions as you do. They have the same goals and aspirations, the same joy, the same tragedy. So you can kind of flavour their life because you know what they're a human being and you know what it's like to be a human being. So in a way, a lot of their experience you've got access to. So with the Sangha, we've got a lot in common already. We've got the same connection to the three jewels, the same connection to ethics, the same love of ethical values. So there's a lot to work with already. And for me, what I will do is particularly this verse around may they develop, may they progress and develop. That's really important for me in this stage because I just imagine this Sangha member that I don't know, what they would be like if they through their practice of the Dharma, they develop, they become kinder, they become more aware, more calm, more happy, more joyful, more bliss in their life. What would that be like? Just imagine that and what that would be like for them. And really want the extent that it comes quite naturally to really want that for them. And what would that be like for the Sangha? What would it be like for them? So I think with the neutral stage, someone from the Sangha, there's a lot of potential, juice in a way. It's probably not just kind of material to work with. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lead us through a reflection where we bring someone to mind from this class, actually. So just choose somebody now. Maybe don't look at them because they won't think you think they're dull. But a potential friend, a potential new friend. Okay, so again, sitting comfortably wherever you are in your chair or on your cushions. And remember, we're bringing a sense of play and creativity to these reflections and to our meditation. So becoming aware of your body, your posture. Maybe aware of your body breathing. Aware of the other Sangha members around you breathing. And there may be some residue, some momentum of metta, of warmth and friendliness from that first reflection. We're just sitting and waiting. Allowing feelings of warmth to arise. Now, bringing to mind, imagining the person from the Sangha, from this class. And trying to do that as vividly as you can. Perhaps remembering an interaction you had with them. Maybe being aware of where they're sitting right now in relation to you in the room. And noticing your response. And if your response is not very much, then don't panic. That's okay. Now using your imagination to try and bring this person more alive, your sense of them to be more vivid, trying to connect with what's common between you. This person has experienced tragedy in their lives like you have. They've experienced joy in their lives just like you have. And on the back of that, they've sought out the Dharma, they've made contact with the Dharma, and are trying to live it in their lives. So we want them to be well and to be happy. and in particular to make progress. For their practice of the Dharma to allow them to grow and unfold, to become freer of suffering, to become kinder, more at peace with themselves. Just imagining what that might be like for them, really wanting that for them. Allowing this neutral person from the Sangha to fade from your imagination, letting go of them. And then I'll ring a bell to end the reflection.
Okay, so now we're going to reflect and think about the person we have difficulties with. So for me, I think this is such a key part of the metta bhavana practice. And in fact, such a radical one. Because I can imagine if you said to quite a few people, what we're going to do is find someone you have difficulties with and wish them well, they'd go, well, why? Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to do that? So I think it's a very important practice, and probably for many of us, a lot of the experience we will have had of this practice, the metta bhavana being powerful, will be with those people we found difficult and our changing relationships to those people sometimes. So it's also, I think, where that concept that actually it doesn't matter with the metta bhavana if you're not feeling it. It's great if you're feeling like waves of love and bliss and stuff, that's fantastic. But it really doesn't matter if you're not, because the important thing is that you're training your mind to respond in a different way. And I think it's with the person you find difficult that's most clear, because it can often, I find it really difficult to actually feel huge amounts of love for them, but the fact that I'm even thinking about them in a particular way, I'm considering them in a different way, is of itself very powerful. And I find that actually the first stage for me is if I'm just willing to put a person in this practice, I'm already gone a long way. It's like, quite often I'll think of a person, I think, oh, not them, no, not them. And then I think actually if I can put them in the metta bhavana, I've already gone a long way to kind of, working on that relationship with them and wishing them well. I think it's also a really important wisdom practice because we're seeing that our own perception of someone isn't the only way of seeing them. So I'm kind of interested that it's so often that the person we put in this stage is somebody who's in a particular role to us. So they're often our manager or our boss, or some kind of a relative or something who've got a particular role that they play. And it's actually that role that we often have difficulties with. And the person, of course, is much bigger than that. And we will have a particular perception of someone, often based on our own histories, what triggers us in people, and we'll have a response to people. But there's so much more to people than that response that we have. So what we will do just kind of naturally is we'll dislike some people, and from that we'll behave in a particular way. Or people will get in our way, stop us from doing what we want to do, and so we'll dislike them. And this practice is very radical because it changes that around, and it kind of gives us freedom, I think, as well. It gives us freedom that we can be with people that we don't like or that we find difficult, and we can still wish them well. We're no longer kind of controlled by our feelings for them in a way. Of course, it's important, isn't it, to remember, hopefully everyone's heard this endless times, to choose in this stage someone you don't find very, very difficult. You know, not someone who's caused you a great deal of harm. You can work up to that, but in a way what we're trying to do is just build our metta muscles, and it's better to start with someone, can often be a friend actually, who at the moment you're finding really irritating, somebody who just bothers you a bit, not someone who's, who's done you a lot of harm. Yeah, and of course, you know, to wish someone well, it doesn't mean we approve of their behaviour. We can wish someone well and not approve of them at all, of their behaviour at all. But probably, like me, you find that in this stage, I'm quite like to find myself revisiting arguments with people or having arguments with them I never had, but I wish I had, kind of thing, you know, like rehearsing them in my head. And so that can lead to a lot of prapancha, a lot of wandering off. So there's something for me in this stage particularly about coming back to my experience very regularly, coming back into my experience of my breathing, I come back to, into my body, and then bringing that person to mind again. And I think often we might find that we actually need a bit of loving kindness for ourselves in this stage. And I think what we can do is we can appreciate how much we're doing a very radical, a very countercultural thing, which is to wish people that we don't like, wish them well and wish them happiness. And we can just appreciate ourselves for the fact that we're doing that. It's a great thing to be doing. Imagine if everybody in the world did it every morning. It would have a huge effect. In this stage, I think there's something perhaps different in the way we might bring someone to mind. So, you know, we said with the person, your friend, and the neutral person, that you try to bring them to mind really vividly. Well, sometimes if you bring someone to mind really vividly who you don't like, you find yourself a bit overwhelmed by either feelings of fear or anger or hatred or something. The emotional response can be quite strong. So maybe something to play with here is instead of bringing them to mind really vividly, you bring them to mind in a different way. So if you, for instance, it is someone at work that you find difficult, you might bring them to mind in a different place. You might imagine them in a place where actually you feel quite safe and happy, so that you're getting a sense of them outside the context as well. Or you might imagine them quite little and far away. So you're not got this sense of this huge person who's kind of like, and all your irritations and dislike of them. Instead, you kind of get a sense of them as a whole person who's quite little, quite far away, and not very powerful at that moment in time. So you're getting a different perspective on them. I think that's, you know, in a way, this stage just really gives us a different perspective on those difficult relationships. And I think during the stage, you can do some reflections. One is, perhaps bring to mind, well, how do I benefit from this person? So they're my boss, they're ever so annoying, they micromanage me and give me far too much work to do. However, if it wasn't for them, I'm making this up, but if it wasn't for them kind of setting up the business that I'm working in, well, I wouldn't have a job. You know, so it's because of them that I get paid. So there's ways that you can kind of see the benefits that people bring us. You've probably had that experience when you do the exercise in the intermediate course of the gratitude, who brings you benefits. And realizing quite often the people we've benefited from the most are not the ones that we thought they would be. It's quite often people that we've had a difficult relationship with that we've benefited from. A second thing is you might just think, well, what do this person's friends or family say about them? How are they when they're out with their friends, they're at home with their family, they're with their dog, whatever it is, they're in a different context. How are they? They're a different person then. And other people most probably really love them and are very fond of them indeed and would think very differently. You know, somebody might well be choosing the person you're going to put in the difficult stage to put in their good friend stage. So it's thinking about them about like that. So let's do our last reflection for today. So again, getting comfortable, just sitting for about 5 minutes. Closing your eyes. Perhaps coming back into contact or experiencing the sense of metta that you've built up with your good friend, the neutral person. A little bit of appreciation for yourself. And then bringing to mind a person you've had difficulties with, who irritates you. And maybe just experimenting with how you bring them to mind. Maybe imagining them in a place where you feel comfortable. Maybe imagining them quite small and quite far away. If you find at all that you're kind of getting carried away with any thoughts, stories about this person, coming back into your experience of your body, your breathing, and bringing them to mind again. And of course, just like you and the neutral person and your good friend, like all of us, these people don't want to suffer. Could even be that the way they behave that you find difficult is coming out of a way to avoid their suffering. They want to be happy, just like we do. You could reflect on any qualities of the person that are much bigger, wider, broader than those that you concentrate on. What would their friends say about them? And if from that you find that you can wish them well, you can wish them happiness, you can wish them freedom from suffering, just dwell on that feeling or that thought. Maybe you could imagine giving this person a gift, a present. Something they'd really like. And imagine their response. And if you find yourself wishing them well, allowing that to just grow in your experience. How would you feel about inviting them into a place that you love? How might they respond to that? How would it look for them to be free from suffering? To be well and happy? How might it look for them to progress? And now letting go of the person you find difficult. And just bringing an awareness to your own experience right now. Wishing yourself well, appreciating that you've just wished metta to someone who you find difficult. And that will have an effect. And then I'm going to ring the bell and we'll bring this reflection to an end. Okay, so we've come to an end now of looking at those 3 stages. So what we're going to do now is go into groups, and you can of course talk about all 5 stages, that's fine. But you might want to talk about anything that you've that came to you or you experienced doing those reflections, any way you'd like to experiment doing the metta bhavana, and any way that you maybe would feel more confidence in doing the metta bhavana, anything that might help you have more confidence in doing metta. Yeah, and then we'll be in groups, we'll talk about that, have a tea break, and then we'll come up and we'll do a full metta bhavana, which is a chance for us to actually do all 5 stages and maybe put into practice some of the things we've reflected on. So the groups will be as normal. We're going to have people who quite a long time ago, about 3 months ago, came off the intermediate course are going to go down into the green room. Women would like to stay up here. People who'd like to be in a men's group go into the bookshop, and anyone who'd like to be in a mixed group go into the red shrine room. Okay.